Can you hear that? The gentle snap of the fire, the warmth of the embers. I'm Nasrallah. Tonight, the Pacific Island voyaging for sleep, Polynesian ocean travel, weeks at sea, slow history, ASMR is our shelter. Leave the cold world behind, come closer to the hearth, and let your worries turn to ash as we begin. The wood snaps. It sighs in the heat. A perfect deep amber glow spills into the dark. Listen closely to the hiss of the sap escaping. The crackle is your focus. The fire breathes a steady rhythm, a primal hypnotic warmth. Feel the scent now, the dry sweet smoke of burning pine, mingling with a memory of distant salt, a vast deep ocean stretching beyond the light, beyond the comfort of land. We know they sailed thousands of miles, the great Polynesian navigators, finding islands smaller than a breath, in a water world that swallowed light. But here is the forgotten secret. It is not how they found the islands. It is how they endured the empty time between them. Weeks becoming months. How did they rest? Did they ever truly sleep? How does the mind survive when the world is only moving water? The secret is not written in the star charts alone. The truth is deeper. It is hidden in the sound of the wave, a true lullaby of deep water that held them suspended between worlds. I am Nasrallah, and this is HISTORYLULLUBAY. We slow down time for truth. We honor the ancient pace. Tonight, we explore the quiet secret, the deep, deep rest of the Vaka voyagers, the ancient science of water sleep. Imagine the canoe, the double-hulled Vaka, small, against the monumental blue. No shelter from the infinite sky, no sound but the wind and the relentless pull of the tide. The salt spray is constant. The deck is wet always. The world pitches and rolls. To travel for weeks requires a profound surrender, a mental discipline we have lost. It is not simply physical endurance. It is a discipline of the subconscious mind. How do you close your eyes when every hour is peril, when the horizon is endless repetition? The answer lies in rhythm. Everything on the Vaka had a rhythm. The sail fabric straining and relaxing, a heavy drum beat, the slosh of the bilge water below the deck, a quiet whispering pulse, and the great cradle rhythm, the gentle slow rise and fall of the swell, the ocean rocking the vessel, rocking the bodies of the crew. Slow, a constant hypnotic movement, a natural ASMR of survival. They did not sleep like we sleep, tucked in darkness and silence. They practiced fragmented sleep, vigilant sleep, resting with one ear open, one eye scanning the cloud pattern, always feeling the subtle change in the wind's texture, but the deepest restorative rest, the truest release. It came when they trusted the water itself, when they understood the ocean was not their enemy, but their home, their mother. The Vaka itself became a living womb, pitching gently, the constant movement bypassing the thinking mind, dulling the edges of of anxiety, the rocking motion, the soft friction of rope on wood, telling the body, you are safe for now, you are moving, you are held. The navigators needed to dream, needed to access the deeper brain layers, because navigation was not just calculation, it was intuition, a conversation with the water. They slept to listen, listened to the subtle shifts in temperature that signaled a current, listened to the deep, low rumble of distant surf, listened to the movement of fish unseen. Their dreams became charts, the subconscious mind sorting vast data, miles and currents, and wave patterns. The sleep was a tool of survival, a necessary trance. They entered the hypnotic state intentionally by focusing on the constant sound, the sound of the bow slicing the surface, the water parting, a continuous soft hiss, a sound that cleanses the mind, the body exhausted by sun and effort, the mind overwhelmed by the scale of the void, needed that deep surrender, to float, to let the great water lullaby take hold. They were floating on time itself, suspended between the past of their home island and the future of the island they sought, held in the present moment by the rhythm of the sea, the rocking, the hissing, the breathing of the ocean, a deep, deep water sleep, a sleep that gave them strength to see the future, to find their way back home. Listen closely now to the fire. Hear the wood crackle, the sap weep out. The amber glow paints the wall a soft, slow red. Inhale the smoke, the deep, earthy scent of burning pine. We sit here, safe, warm, dry. But imagine crossing the largest water on earth. Not for days, not for weeks, but for months. Imagine the endless blue, the constant motion, the desperate search for land. We think of these travelers as heroes conquering the waves. But here is the forgotten secret. To survive the vastness, they did not just sail. They learned how to sleep the ocean away. They learned how to turn the terror of travel into a hypnotic lullaby. Was it bravery, or was it a deep human surrender to the void? A moral bargain struck just to keep moving forward. Look at the flame, how gently it breathes. We pull closer to the heat. We pull closer to the gentle sound of the flame. The fire whispers a soft, soft tale. The ocean did not whisper. The ocean screamed in a monotone roar. A sound that stripped away thought. A sound that demanded exhaustion. Think of the salt crusting on their eyelids, their lips, their wounds. The deep, relentless cold that seeped not just into the skin, but into the marrow, into the dream. The sun was a liar out there. It promised warmth, but the sea beneath was a grave of freezing water. Cold, cold, cold. 1,000 miles from anything recognizable. The wind was a rasping voice, tearing at the canvas, tearing at the skin. They lived on the knife edge, between movement and collapse. And the smell, oh, the smell of human survival. It was not the sweet scent of the sea you imagine. It was the smell of weeks-old fish, dried vomit, stale sweat, the fermenting coconut, the unwashed bodies huddled together. The stink of desperation became a kind of perfume, a permanent clinging scent that marked them forever, a scent they carried even when they finally reached shore, the scent of having survived too much, the scent of having witnessed the absolute quiet failure of hope. We honor the achievement, the arrival, but who pays the price for the weeks of slow dying? Who pays the cost for the navigator's mistakes? The navigator, the one who holds the stars in his head. He carries the weight of every silent mouth, every aching muscle, every life that surrendered to the lullaby of the sea. That is the moral gray of the voyage, the silence of sacrifice. When the fifth person stops waking up, when the water runs low, and the choice must be made. Do you share the last drop, or do you reserve it for the strongest, the future? The history books show the map, the destination, the glorious landing. They never show the cramped, exhausted faces, the internal, debate the moral stain of making choices under water duress. The decision to survive is often the decision to let something precious die inside you. Day 40, day 60, day 90. The body stops fighting the motion. It accepts the rocking, the endless side to side. The brain finds a frequency, a low hum, a trauma response, disguised as tranquility. They enter the sleep of the traveler, a shallow, exhausted slumber where the mind does not dream of home. The mind dreams only of being still, of the absence of motion. The deepest human cost was not the hunger. It was the loss of the memory of stillness, the loss of the memory of firm ground. The ground was a myth, the memory of land, a luxury. The only reality was the cold deck, the slapping, water, the rhythmic creak of the wood, the creak, creak, creak of the canoe, holding together, barely holding together. And the navigator watches the stars, knowing that his survival depends on his people's surrender, their ability to submit to the hypnotic pace. The pace of history is slow out there on the water, the ultimate lullaby of the great blue. It promises nothing but the continuation of the wave. And you sail on, you sail on, you sail on. The heat has settled now. The crackling whispers of the burning pine fade to black sand silence. We drift now on the deepest blue obsidian, blue dark water, the water that held their sleep, the water that was their cradle, their classroom, their only home. Think of them rocking, rocking, rocking for 30 nights, 60 nights, maybe more. The scent of the salt air, heavy and clean. A cold mist rising from the immense heart of the Pacific. They did not fear the darkness. They mastered the darkness. The stars were not distant gods. They were familiar faces. A map drawn not on parchment, but etched into the soul. A precise language only the wave speakers could understand. The legacy of the long sleep is not simply navigation. It is endurance of the quiet mind. It is the wisdom of the long horizon. They traveled thousands of miles without compass, without sextant, without fear. They traveled on feeling, feeling the rhythm of the waves, the great pulse of the ocean floor. primary swells traveling unimpeded from distant shores. Each swell a fingerprint, each movement a direction home. This knowledge was too deep for books. It was passed through song, through chant, through the gentle rock of the cradle. It was breath W, or centuries before the word existed. Imagine the weight of that silence. Weeks where the only conversation was the lapping water, the wooden hull creaking a steady low lullaby, canoe silence, deep ocean silence. They slept in shifts, small pockets of restorative peace. While one listened to the water, another watched the sky. And in that deep sleep, the ancestors offered counsel, dreaming the direction, dreaming the arrival. We look back and call it a miracle, a great migration, unmatched in human history. But they saw it as necessity, a conversation with the living world. And here is the forgotten secret. The great journey was never just about finding new land. It was about mastering stillness, finding the center point of the mind that is never truly lost. They did not just arrive at islands. They arrived at a profound understanding of universal belonging. Every atom of their being was tuned to the massive resonance of the Pacific. The rhythm of the planet was their internal clock. But what happened to that perfect tuning? What shadow fell across the great voyaging? Why, after centuries of masterful travel, did the canoes sometimes stop? Why did some islands remain unvisited? Some knowledge sealed away. The legends whisper of a boundary, not a physical edge of the sea, but a psychic barrier, a place the ancestors commanded them not to cross. What did they find at the limits of their known world? Was it a storm greater than any they had faced? Was it a creature of the deep dark? Or was it an unsettling truth about human nature itself? A choice to safeguard the knowledge rather than spread it further. The mystery lingers like the cold mist on the water. It settles heavy on the modern mind. We have the satellites, the engines, the constant buzzing static of speed. But we have lost the silent communion with the wave. We have forgotten how to sleep on the open ocean and wake up knowing exactly where we are. The great journey is finished, but the great silence remains. The knowledge of the stellar paths is waiting for us, waiting for the quiet moment when we are ready to listen. Take a deep breath now. Feel the profound weight of that ancestral presence. They are not gone. They are sleeping on the water, and the stars still shine for those who remember their names. Next time, we will leave the deep sea silence and focus our hypnotic lens on a single remarkable detail. The coconut. We will explore how this single object, this small brown husk, was not just food, but the master survival kit. The compass, the clock, the water source, the true unsung hero of the long Polynesian voyage, and the terrifying secret hidden inside its flesh. A secret that explains how they defied dehydration for months at sea. Sleep well knowing that the journey never truly ends. The water is waiting. The coconut is calling. Until then, rest in the shadow of the great wave. We remember the fire, the gentle violence of the flames that licked the edge of the darkness. We remember the crackling wood, the scent of burning pine, that comforting heat before the vast coldness began. The shore fades now. The amber glow is just a memory, a warmth we carry under the sternest star. We are away now, away from the land, away from the shadows, away from the gentle safety of the reef. The sound changes, the rhythm alters. It is the endless whisper of water, the relentless slap of the hull against the sea. 1,000 miles, 1,000 days, stretching out in endless blue. The true journey begins not at the launch, but in the moment the land disappears entirely. Now we ask a deeper question, the central secret of oceanic survival. How does a people sleep when the ocean demands everything, demands total focus, demands perfect vigilance? How does the mind find rest when a single missed wave, a single moment of inattention could mean oblivion? This is the beautiful paradox, the slow, difficult wisdom of Polynesian voyaging sleep. It was not mere exhaustion. It was an acquired trance, a shared rhythm of rest and watchfulness, a collective breath. They slept not just with their eyes closed. They slept with their deeper senses open, listening to the constant conversation of the sea, sensing the subtle shift of the current, the small pressure of the wind, the tiny change in the pattern of the swells. The navigators slept in rotation. They slept in absolute trust. They slept in the arms of the ancestral knowledge that guided them always, always, always. Listen closely to the sounds of their deep rest, the hypnotic pull of the ocean music, the rhythmic groan of the lashings, holding the twin hulls together in their perfect tension, the slow creak of the mast reaching high into the blackness. This noise was not disturbance. It was a lullaby. It was confirmation that the vessel still lived, still breathed, still moved toward its destiny. The water music, the eternal flowing sound that washed away the worries of the land, the frantic thoughts of the shore. They learned to interpret the rocking, the steady sway, the gentle, unpredictable dance of the ocean as a comfort, not a threat. Repetition, repetition, repetition. The constant sway, the cradle of the ocean, the endless rhythm, the slow flow. The body adjusted, the mind surrendered to the flow that kept them alive. It is said that true wayfinding was not just practiced during the waking hours. The greatest secrets, the hidden paths of the currents, the deep pressure system shifts, were often revealed in a half-sleep state. The dreaming mind, the resting mind, continued the calculation, continued the mapping, the sensing, the knowing. They sailed not just by the stars. They sailed by the feeling in the pit of their stomach, the knowing that resided deep within the subconscious maps, etched by generations of travel. The ocean spoke, and the sleeping mind listened deeply, listened constantly. The deep oceanic quiet, that profound rest where the journey continues, even when the eyes are closed. To Tonight we seek the lost rhythm, the forgotten breath of the long ocean sleep, the sleep that guided civilization across the widest water, the slow history of sleeping navigators, sleeping navigators, sleeping in trust under the silent vastness. The embers hold us now, they hold the breath, the soft red glow, a shield against the endless night. We speak of the long sleep, the sleep of islands found. But let us pause, let us listen to the waves that ask for payment. The ocean asks, the ocean always asks. We left the shore of plenty for the uncertain hunger, and the hunger begins weeks before the landfall. The moral grays of the great blue voyage begin with the stomach. They begin with the rationing, with the choice that tears at the navigator's soul, the Tohungatuho. He watches his people shrink. He watches them fade into the salt mist. He knows the calculations. He knows the star paths of Tangaroa. But the sea is unpredictable. The sea is a gambling god. And the navigator must decide who drinks the last coconut ration, who gets the last dried morsel of fish that tastes only of salt and desperation. This is the hidden cost, not the adventure told in song, but the cold arithmetic of life and death. Imagine the chill, not the sharp bite of winter here beside the fire, but the soaking cold, the permanent wetness of the vaca floor, the woven matting soaked through days and nights, the skin chafed by salt, and damp a constant torment, a constant burn, and the smell, oh the smell, of the great voyage. We romanticize the fresh wind, the clear air, but the smell is rot and human failure. It is the sick, sweet musk of vomit when the stomach gives up. It is the smell of urine mixing with the bilge water and the stored provisions. It is the rank oil of unwashed bodies pressed together for warmth. Day after day, night after night, the scent of burning pine here is clean. It is a blessing. On the canoe, there is no cleansing. There is only the accumulated weight of human endurance. The weight that never leaves the weight that presses down into the deep sleep. But there is no deep sleep. There is only the swaying half-rest, the terrible hypnotic rhythm of the swell. Hush whispers the wave, hush, says the wind. The sound is not silence. It is the relentless roar of the hull cutting water, the creaking of the lashings, the soft groan of the wood, protesting the endless pressure, a constant sound of vibrating drone that steals the peace. How do you find rest when every muscle is screaming for the solid earth, when every dream is of a stable platform, a place where the horizon stops spinning? They slept in shifts. They snatched minutes of oblivion. But the mind remained tethered to the task, the hand always close to the paddle. The fear was the shadow. The fear was the cold companion. What happens when a man falls sick? What happens when he can no longer pull his weight? The moral gray deepens here. It grows heavy, like the leaden sky. The communal obligation demands the strong carry the weak. But when the survival of the 70 depends on the sacrifice of the one, the navigator must look away, he muse. Choose the 70. he must accept the necessary brutality of the endless ocean crossing to reach the promised land, to bring the sleeping seed of their people to a new shore. He makes the choice not out of malice, but out of the deepest love for the future, a future bought with the slow fatting of a weary life on the open water. The silence that follows that decision is the truest horror. The silence is heavy. The silence is necessary. The silence is the sound of survival. We sit here warm and dry, listening to the gentle crackle. But out there on the dark water, the great canoes carried the burden. They carried the fear. They carried the necessary lie. The lie that said, we will all survive this. We will all survive this. The deep breath of the ocean lingers now. The salt spray memory dries on the ancient wood. We watch the wake widen and vanish. The path they carved is swallowed whole, swallowed by the blue silence. The great current takes its toll, leaving only the ghost of an ancestor's dream, a dream told in whispers, a dream sung into the wind. The great navigators they left, no maps of parchment, no iron tablets, no permanent stone scripts of their travels. Their library was the skin of the sea, their history the rhythm of the waves. The knowledge was held not in ink, but in the bloodline, the sacred geometry of the stars, the shift of the wind against the cheek, the taste of the deepest water. They knew the deep water. They trusted the deep water. This legacy, this stunning survival was passed throat to throat, father to child, grandmother to apprentice. 1,000 years of stellar computation stored in a chant, a memory not tied tight in the oldest minds. This is the true mystery, the magnificent forgetting. How do you store an ocean voyage? How do you carry 1,000 islands in a single song? The legacy is not just the land they found. It is the knowledge they refused to write down, the secret power of the temporary truth, the constant movement. The canoe stops the knowledge, moves on. The coral heads, they hold secrets, secrets older than the oldest living tree. We stand on shores built by giants, shores of volcanic rock and sudden green, and we ask, where did they go next? When the islands were filled, when the canoes found harbor, did the longing stop? Did the restless spirit finally sleep? Or did they just sail, further still, into the blank spaces we still cannot name? They sailed the impossible distances, found the smallest pinpricks of land in the endless blue, and then in certain places the voices stopped. The great double hulls ceased to glide across the horizon. We find the stone foundations, the ancient fish hooks. We find the residue of powerful human existence. But the people are gone, or they simply stopped looking outward. They turned inward to the lagoon, the mystery of cessation, the ultimate lull, the deep, profound silence after the longest journey. This silence is louder than any battle cry. It asks us about contentment, about rest. When is the map complete? When is the voyage truly over? We chase the echoes, the faint drum beat, the lingering scent of coconut oil and fire. We seek the point of origin, we seek the first great push into the endless sea. If the destination was the new beginning, then what was the very first starting place? What fire lit the absolute oldest urge? What ancient land whispered its secret of migration? The journey starts not in the Pacific, but far, far before the first canoe was even shaped by the adze. We must now turn our gaze far west, to the edges of Asia, to the rise of the sun itself. We must seek the mother tongue, the deepest ancestral memory, the whispers of the very first ocean crossing. But wait, before we sail back to the origin point, before we trace the first footprint in the ancient sand, there is one island, one single massive secret, hidden in plain sight on a high lonely peak, an island that refuses to surrender its mathematical code. Its stone face watches the horizon waits. Next time we will slow down and decode the silence of Rapa Nui, the island of the giant whispers, the final proof that they did not forget, but that they chose a magnificent ending, a mystery carved in stone. The fire memory returns. It is the core warmth, a slow heat blooming in the chest. Remember the crackling wood. Remember the deep amber glow, the scent of burning pine, resin rising heavy thick. It kept the demons of the dark sea back. It gave us our anchor in the swirling black water. We think of the great canoes, the sun, the stars, the navigation. But what is the secret forgotten rhythm? The truth of weeks suspended on nothing but water. How did a body truly rest when the horizon vanished, when the earth itself became a myth? The voyagers, they sailed not just by day. They sailed through the long, cold nights. They sailed through the endless starfields of the south. Sleep was not a luxury. It was the most valuable commodity, a survival mechanism more vital than fresh water or the finding of the fish, because the ocean demands its toll. It demands vigilance. Vigilance always. Yet the voyage might last 30 days. 30 days of endless blue rocking motion. The mind must surrender to the deep blue cradle. The crew was divided into watches, the sacred rotation of rest, a slow dance with unavoidable exhaustion. They perfected the art of polyphasic rest. They did not take 8 hours, a land-dweller's decadent block of time. They slept in shallow pools of time, a brief 2 hours, then wake. 2 hours, then wake. The sleep was not still. It was a rocking sleep, a deep hypnotic lullaby provided by the hull against the wave. The hull against the wave. The water was the cradle. Imagine the sound, the singular sound, the constant hiss of the bow cutting water. It becomes the silence. It replaces all noise. The mind learns to filter the rhythm. The mind learns to accept the sway. There is no land memory, no scent of earth or mountain air, only salt and the deep cold starlight. This endless motion, this perpetual slow movement, it shifts the brain itself. Sleep becomes less about stillness and more about integration, integrating the rocking, integrating the sound, becoming of the great slow ocean machine. They did not just sleep on the canoe. They slept with the canoe. We speak of the fatigue, the physical strain, but consider the sensory deprivation, the mind searching for a fixed point, a constant anchor that is not there. The only constant is the wave. The wave is the constant. The navigator's body becomes a living gyroscope, calibrated over weeks of slow motion, the inner ear perpetually correcting. Even when they lay down, the world kept moving under them. It was a practice of letting go, letting the earth dissolve, allowing the ocean to carry the burden of stability. Where did the weary head fall? Beneath the small thatched shelter, a protective curve against the spray. They lay upon rough, woven mats, coconut fiber comfort, a slight give against the hard wood floor. They had to be lashed sometimes, tied lightly to the deck structure, not for security against giants or rogue waves, but security against themselves, against the sudden lurch, the sleepwalker who might confuse the edge of the canoe with the edge of a dream. The Pacific demanded caution always, even in the deepest slumber. They were always tethered, always aware of the cold black drop below. This surrender to the sea rhythm, it is the forgotten secret. The Polynesian sailor understood that true rest meant acceptance. Acceptance of the danger, acceptance of the cold, acceptance that the world was now entirely water. The hypnotic sway, the constant sound, it forced a meditation, a sleep so profound because it was so often broken, a deep rest rooted in absolute faith in the vessel, in the stars, in the slow, deep breathing of the world around them, breathing around them, the deep, long, slow breathing of the ocean. We stay here now, by the slow fire, the embers sighing a soft, red song, a deep amber pulse. It pushes back the cold. It pushes back the cold. But listen closely to the crackle. The fire cannot push back the memory. The great deep cold of the ocean night, when the water rose to swallow the horizon, and the starlight seemed too far away. We spoke of glory before, of discovery, and bold spirits, but history lullaby must also whisper of the costs, the necessary cruelty of the long voyage, the gray moral tide. Think of the Araki, the master navigator, his face etched by the sun, and the terrible knowledge. He knew exactly how many breaths were left, how many mouths, how much water. The ocean did not care for courage. It only measured liters and hours. The great cold math. It was not a democratic journey. The weak were exposed first, the slow, the feverish. When the fresh water ran low, when the casks rattled hollow, who got the last drops? Was it the strongest paddler, the leader, the child? Or was it the one already dreaming of the deep sleep, the one whose surrender meant more for the others? This is the hidden ledger of TH, a deep blue path, the burden of survival, the moral graze that clung to the wet fibers of the rope. Like sticky damp salt, the smell of the canoe was not romance. It was a profound human smell, a constant wetness, the sharp brine, the stale breath, the sour fermenting sap. the oil of the fish, guts mixed with the sweat of fear, and the slow decay of wet woven matting, the scent of life persisting against all logic. The sounds were relentless. The lap, lap, lap against the hull, a mesmerizing, hypnotic sound, but also the sound of endless exposure. The wind was a cold, sharp whistle, a constant complaint. The worst sound was the low, rhythmic scraping, the skin rubbing raw against the rough coir rope, the sound of pain that could not be attended to, because the hands were needed for the paddle, the bailing, the holding tight. You could taste the journey in the air, not just the salt, but a metallic tang, the taste of low blood, iron, the taste of exhaustion, the constant gnawing hunger that became its own kind of sleep. The eyes were constantly burned by the reflection of the midday sun, the pupils shrinking, searching for shade that never came. Then came the cold, the deep, endless cold of the southern crossings. The body cannot maintain the heat. It pulls the warmth inward, away from the fingers, away from the toes. The fingers turn waxy pale, the lips turn blue. The sleep they found was not restful peace. It was the edge of hypothermia, a profound, heavy sinking. They huddled together, not for comfort alone, but for the desperate transfer of remaining heat, a communal biological bargain. We share our warmth. We survive this hour. The heavy breathing, the shared moisture, the smell of closeness. They would wake shivering, not knowing if the chill was the air or the cold of their own slowing heart. This was the lullaby of the great voyaging, a slow, deep rocking into absolute physiological surrender. The mind let go of hope and doubt. It simply counted the movement, the heavy, slow movement, the endless, heavy movement of the great waka on the deep, cold sea. We lean closer now to the fire. Let the heat soak back into our bones. Let the amber light blind us to the moral gray for a moment, just for a moment. But remember the cold. Remember the terrible, necessary choices. Remember the smell of the persistence. That is the true heart of the vast ocean story. The cold, the dark, the water, the weight, the enduring human weight. The history sleeps now. The great canoes are pulled ashore. The sails are folded carefully beneath the palm thatch. The long journey of the ancestors has settled into myth, but the settlement, the creation of a new world, that is their silent legacy, a legacy whispered into the bone of the reef, a quiet story written in the greening of the volcanic soil. They left behind not statues of kings, but stones that chart the rising of the sun, monuments to celestial knowledge, a memory held deep in the collective breathing, the mana, the spiritual power of the navigators. It still clings to the air above the lagoon, a presence heavy and profound. Feel the deep oceanic weight of this achievement. They spanned the greatest ocean of the earth. They connected the dots of the infinite blue. They redefined the possible for all who came after. The Pacific became their inner sea, their home, their garden, their silent protector. Look at the faces of those who remain. They carry the voyage in their very posture, the deep wisdom of the current in their eyes, the salt spray in the lines around their mouth. The legacy is not something found in a museum case. It is the life itself, lived on the edge of the unending ocean. The heritage breathes deeply now. The heritage breathes slowly. But then we arrive at the great silence, the mystery that wraps itself around the final decades of expansion. Why did they stop searching? After conquering thousands of miles, after reaching the most remote corners of the world, the voyaging heart seemed to quiet. The great migration came to a stop, a gentle halt. Was it contentment? Was it exhaustion after generations of risk? Was it a choice to preserve the precious knowledge they had acquired? Did they realize the danger of stretching too thin? The islands they had found provided everything: taro and sweet pate, the protective shade of the coconut palm, the steady rhythm of the predictable seasons. Did they choose the comfort of the land over the chaos of the sea? This question lingers in the humid air. Did the mana of the journey fade? Or did the deepest knowledge of the stars become too sacred to share? The historical record offers only fragments, a slight chilling silence after the thunder of arrival, the deep quiet after the crash of the Discovery wave. The ultimate truth is perhaps unknowable. It is tucked away in the ancient songs, chanted in language that few now fully understand. The spiritual dimension of the stopping, the choice to turn inward to define the border, the deep breath taken after the longest marathon humanity has ever run. The legacy is the silence. The legacy is the peace. But even in the deep quiet, there are echoes, faint, troubling suggestions of journeys that went farther, voyages that reached past the established boundaries, past the familiar circle of Polynesian contact. We know they settled Hawaii. We know they touched New Zealand. We know they mastered the entire triangle. But what of the currents that pulled them south? What of the unexpected storms that scattered the canoes? What of the phantom islands that appeared, then vanished? The history is mostly written by those who survived, by those who settled and built their merry. But next time, we must look for the others, the ones who did not return, the pioneers who vanished entirely into the mist. Next time, we will track the missing ships, the canoes that sailed off the edge of the historical map. The true limits of their world remain a deep and troubling mystery. We must follow the current that leads to total disappearance. The phantom fleets the forgotten souls. We will listen for the echo of the lost paddle stroke, the whisper of the deep blue swallowing the great voyager's whole. Join us next time as we search for the ghost fleet, the enduring mystery of the true Polynesian endpoint. Listen closely, listen now. The sound of the fire. It crackled, it snapped. A warm memory, a deep red light. Amber glow spreading on the rough wood. The scent of burning pine, smoke thick and slow. It pulled us in. It promised warmth. It promised ending. The fire always ends. But what if the journey never did? What if you left the fire behind and sailed for 70 sunrises, 70 nights, watching the water breathe? We talk of heroes and stars. We speak of courage and landfall. But the forgotten secret of the Great Vaca was not how they found the next island, but how they managed to sleep, how they found deep rest when nothing held still. This is slow history. This is the lullaby of the sea. For we leave the comfort of the fire. We step onto the planks of the double-hulled canoe. The Vaca, imagine the shift from the solid ground, the predictable earth, to the endless constant movement, the deep blue cradle that never stops rocking. The voyaging life, it breaks you down to build you up. It demands a different rhythm, a sea rhythm, a breath taken in tandem with the deep ocean swell. You cannot sleep the sleep of the shore, the easy deep sleep where the world waits for you to wake. Out here, the world does not wait. The currents pull, the wind shifts, the sun burns. For weeks on end, the only horizon is water. The only sound is the persistent hypnotic rush of the hull slicing through the water. Hush, the wash of the water, the constant wash. How did they endure the relentless sameness, the psychological weight of the blue emptiness? It demanded a new kind of rest, a rest that was simultaneously deep and aware. The navigator, the master of the Vaca, he could not afford complete unconsciousness. His ears were always open, always tasting the wind. His inner compass always spinning softly, even when his body was seeking oblivion. We are seeking the sacred geography of sleep at sea, the slow, steady breathing that keeps the mind tethered to the physical reality of the boat. They slept in shifts, small pockets of profound stillness. It was a practiced vulnerability, lying down on the hard deck, feeling the spray, feeling the cold skin of the ocean. Below them, the water rushed, rushing, always rushing. The ocean is chaos, but the sleeper must find order. The navigator taught his crew to listen for the waves, not just the crash of the surface, but the deep undercurrent, the distant roar of a reef, a sound beyond hearing, but felt in the chest, felt in the gut. This was the lullaby of the journey, the great wide soundscape of the deep, the creaking of the lashings, the soft moan of the wood, the steady, relentless rhythm. Rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. They learned to detach their inner minds from the visual monotony. The visual field was empty blue and blinding, but the auditory field was rich and informative, a symphony of navigation, played softly, played slowly, and they slept to it. They slept, but of the mind remained awake. The sleeping eye, watching the horizon, the star rise, the weather pattern. The sleeping eye, always listening for the shift. Imagine the heavy fatigue, the weight of the sun, the labor of the day, the muscles burning the salt, drying the skin, and then the absolute necessity of rest. A forced rest, a surrender to the movement. They sank into the movement. They did not fight the constant rocking. They became one with the Vaca, one with the water, sinking deep into the rhythm, the deep, slow rhythm of the ancient Pacific. They slept like water sleeps. We are still sailing, still moving. We are learning to rest when nothing holds still. We find our quiet in the steady rush, the soft wash of the waves against the side. Hush now, the voyage continues. The water breathes, and we breathe with it. Slowly, deeply, we stay here tonight by the honest heat. The pine resin pops a sweet sound, a slow sound, a comforting sound. We listen deep to the wood crackling. We listen deep to the fire breathing. We are safe now from the water's cold promise, but the mind wanders back, always back, to the deep time of the voyaging pact. The weeks at sea, the ocean travels, the cold reality beneath the hypnotic sway. It was not all starlight and heroism, no. It was the moral gray, the necessary cruelty. Imagine the smell of it after 40 days. The smell of mildew, the smell of stale sickness, the heavy scent of the wet fiber ropes, the sharp metallic tang of persistent fatigue, the breath of 20 people confined close, huddled for warmth that failed to truly warm. The cold did not come quickly, it came slow. It crept into the bone, it seeped into the spirit. A cold that demanded a sacrifice, a terrible toll. The navigators burdened the darkest weight he carried. He held the fate of the lineage in his hands, and the line between survival and sin blurred. It was an invisible border, sometimes crossed silently, when the water barrels grew light and the thirst fierce, when the sun beat down an unforgiving judgment, and one life, one elderly spirit, one failing frame, became a liability, a danger to the whole. Was it murder, or was it profound navigation? A choice made in the deep dark, when the moon hid. A quiet push, a gentle whispered goodbye. The body returned to the vast, indifferent sea, an offering, a necessary horror, a silent agreement. This is the secret the voyagers held close. The price of discovery, the cost of the islands. They never spoke of it easily, no, never. They buried it beneath the sand after landfall. They cleansed themselves with the smoke and the ritual fires, but the smell of that cold, desperate choice remained. It clung to the wood it lived in the fibers of the sail. It was the smell of fear mixed with duty. The sound was the worst sound, the constant cold drumming, the hull complaining against the crushing weight of the wave. A deep rhythmic slap, a relentless accusation. It never stopped, no, never stopped its cold rhythm. The high, thin cry of a child swallowed whole by the wind. The groan of the timber straining against the pressure. We hear only the gentle hiss of the resin now. We hear only the safe music of the hearth fire. The fire pushes the ocean, sounds back, back, back. The fire holds the darkness at bay for us. But the cold memory persists, the cold truth endures. It was a cold that judged you, the ocean cold. It was a cold that demanded your moral integrity, and sometimes demanded you set it aside. For the sake of the many, for the future generations. They sailed not just on skill, but on sacrifice. They navigated not just by stars, but by terrible choices. This is the hidden history, the untold suffering, the human cost measured in cold, wet weeks, measured in the unspoken pacts of survival, the scent of salt and sorrow forever entwined. The voyagers knew this cold. They carried it always, even standing on the warm sand of their new home. The amber glow warms our faces now. The slow heat seeps into our tired shoulders. We honor that hard navigation, that heavy weight. We remember the cold choices, the deep silence, the vast, unforgiving ocean demanding its due. We stay here safe and warm, and we remember. We remember the scent of the brine, the smell of the end, the desperate, beautiful journey that cost so much. The fire remembers it. All the fire tells the story slow. The deep water knows their names. The salt wind remembers their whispers. Whispers of the navigators. Whispers of the islands they left behind. The wake settles now a velvet shadow on the sea. But the legacy does not settle. It rises in the mist of the morning. It calls out in the low hum of the conch shell. Calling, calling, always calling. We speak of latitude and longitude. We speak of mathematics and the great clock of the sky. But the true secret, the true deep secret, rests in the space between the sightings, the long dark nights when only the ear could see, when the canoe breathed with the ocean and the navigator breathed with the canoe. That silent conversation, that unseen thread of direction. How could 1,000 years of darkness hold such precise light? They did not just arrive. They were summoned by the rhythm, the ancient rhythm of the Pacific breath, a pulse felt through the hull, a message delivered by the subtle dance of the current. They were reading the ocean floor without sight. They were smelling the islands long before they rose over the horizon. The scent of damp earth, the sweetness of blooming noni, the telltale signs whispered on the wind. Imagine that surrender, the total trust in the environment, the absence of artificial measurement, only instinct, only inherited wisdom. The modern world forgets this language, this deep immersion, this slow knowing. We look for maps and instruments. They looked for patterns and signs. A cloud formation, meaning fresh water nearby. A specific wave refraction, meaning a lagoon waiting just beyond the reef. This is the enduring mystery, the poetry written not in ink, but in sea foam. The memory of the voyagers continues to shift, like the slow motion of the great southern stars, always turning, always returning. Feel the heat on your palm, the soft amber glow reflecting on the low wood ceiling. The embers shift and hiss a quiet history. They burn slowly. They tell the tale slowly of the great courage of the ancestors, of the vastness they embraced. They did not conquer the ocean. They became the ocean, a memory carried in the current, a promise whispered on the sand. The fire crackles, gently inviting us deeper. We have followed the trajectory of the Vaca. We have listened to the language of the stars. We have watched the canoe builders shape the timber. But there is a final layer of mystery we have yet to touch, a layer often overlooked in the hurried histories of migration. What was the real cargo? What did the taonga, the wise ones, truly carry? Was it just planting stock and firestones? Was it just the memory of the stars? Or was there something else hidden in the deepest hold? A knowledge so powerful, so delicate, it could only be transported on the slow roll of the deep sea. A secret map made not of paper, but of bone and ritual. Next time, we dive beneath the waves of history, into the forgotten traditions of sacrifice and selection. The selection of the voyagers was not random. It was a spiritual choosing. Who was truly chosen to carry the seed of the future? And what did that choice demand of them? What oath of silence bound the chosen few? And what precious, terrifying relic traveled with them, wrapped in the fine mats of ancient memory? Next time, we uncover the cost of the migration, the secret cost of the slow sleep journey. I remember the fire a long time ago. The sound, the low breathing sound of the wet logs giving up their heat, a deep amber glow on the faces watching, a scent of burning pine soft and slow, and beneath the pine, the brine, the salt, the deep sea air. We sat close to the warmth, knowing the warmth was temporary. Now forget the fire, forget the land, forget the solid ground we stand upon. This is the secret forgotten by history books. When a person sails the Pacific for weeks and months unending, how does the human mind, how does the restless soul find rest? How do you sleep when the world itself is a hammock of water, a vast black silk cradle, constantly swaying, constantly moving? Listen closely now to the lullaby of the hull, the deep, soft groan of the lashed wood, the SSSSHHH sound of the water sliding past the bamboo. Sliding past. The ocean does not rush here. It breathes. The vessel is not a vehicle. The vessel is a living thing. Imagine lying down flat on the narrow platform of the double hull, your body molded to the curve of the craft. The wind, the only blanket, the stars, the only ceiling. The body learns the rhythm of the swell, the long, slow push of the ocean current. It is predictable, it is profound, left and right, up and down. 1,000 years of natural metronome. The greatest navigational skill was not finding the island. The greatest skill was accepting the void, accepting the distance, allowing the sleep to come. The navigator, the captain, the master, he must sleep the deepest sleep. To recover, the mind needs the darkness. The body needs the silence within the noise. The noise of the journey becomes the silence of the rest. The steady slap, the steady pull, the steady release. This is not chaotic movement. This is physics made gentle. They called this state moe hohanu, deep sleep. The sleep that comes only when you trust the water implicitly. To sleep well is to navigate well. If the mind is frayed, if the tension remains in the shoulders, the stars become blurry, the path becomes unclear, rest is the rudder. They understood that the ocean demands collaboration. You cannot fight the water. You must surrender to its motion. The boat is your skin. The wave is your blood. When you surrender, the anxiety dissolves. The horizon line becomes less a boundary and more a promise of continuation. This deep trust, this deep slow giving in, is what transforms a journey of survival into a journey of rest. We think of voyaging as adrenaline and struggle, but for the Polynesians, for the masters of the deep, voyaging was a practice of patience, a meditation on movement. The canoe was engineered for this specific kind of rest. The slight flex of the timbers, the rigging tuned like a vast stringed instrument, singing soft notes to the black night. The weight of the crew distributed, the water flowing free between the hulls, creating its own perpetual soft, humming sound, a sound designed to quiet the land mind, to settle the human heart. The spray is a cool mist. It settles on the exposed skin like dew, a kiss from the depth, a cleansing chill. The moon, when it is present, paints a silver strip on the deck, an ephemeral pathway leading nowhere but forward. And you hear the soft breathing of your companions, the slow intake, the long exhale, everyone trusting the weave of the rope, everyone trusting the strength of the coconut fiber. The weight of the sky presses down, the weight of the sea lifts up. You are suspended, perfectly suspended. The world slows down. The concept of time fades. There is only this moment, the gentle shift, the profound peace, the deep, slow history of the water holding you, holding you, holding you. A perfect cradle under the immense black sky. This is the true secret of the long voyage sleep, the cradle of the deep. We watch the embers now, the heart of the long night. The fire breathes low, a soft amber stain against the void. You hear the faint crackle of the wood, pine brought from a distant shore, a memory of land now burning away. The sea sounds like a vast, endless sigh, a low rumble beneath the canoe floor. Always there, always waiting. We spoke of the stars, the deep charts, the wayfinding certainty, but certainty fades fast. When the cold seizes you, when the cold finds the marrow and refuses to leave, this is the gray space of the voyage, the space where history turns quiet, the place where the price of the horizon is counted in shivering skin and rasping breath. The scent of salt and ancient fish oil clings to the sailcloth, but beneath that, there is the smell of humanity, stressed thin, sweat turning stale and rancid, the metallic tang of sickness clinging to the sleeping mats. There is no freshness out here, only the constant dampness. The wet chill of the wind slices through the bone, a tireless blade cutting away your warmth. You pull the woven tapa close, but the cold knows how to wait. The cold is patient. The cold never tires. Imagine weeks of this. The salt water soars on the wrists, the perpetual burning in the throat. We carried the dreams of our ancestors, and and the fragile hope of land. But sometimes the dreams were too heavy. Sometimes the hope was too fragile. The moral gray is simply survival. When the water gourds became light, lighter than they should be, and the sun beat down with relentless judgment, who gets the last drops? Who is deemed strong enough to continue? Who is allowed the mercy of the sleep? The eldest among them, the ones whose journeys were almost done. They understood the silent calculus. They knew the unspoken contract of the ocean, that the sea demands a tithe, a sacrifice for the rest to pass. You do not choose who dies, but you choose who lives. By the rationing, by the small denial, it is a necessary cruelty, wrapped in the dignity of shared suffering and the guilt of the survivors. It is a sin of omission, a failure to fight for what you know is lost. This is not the heroic tale of the navigator. This is the heavy sorrow of the common soul, drifting in the dark, trying to quiet the hollow eye of hunger. The leaders, the great navigators, they had to carry this weight. They looked across the water, and they saw the way forward, but they also looked at their crew, and they saw the cost of every forward motion. Every degree they steered south, every knot they gained, was paid for by a life stretched too far. It is a moral calculus you cannot escape. The fire draws us close. It reminds us of the land we left. It reminds us of the warmth we crave. But the fire also shines, a hard, judging light, on the faces of those who watched another fall silent, who watched another slip into the sea's embrace, and did not have the strength or the stores to prevent it. They learned to whisper apologies to the waves, apologies for the living, apologies for the choices that kept them alive. The wind sighs the sea, whispers the secrets of that silence. The cold remembers. The cold remembers everything. The memory settles now like fine dust on the deck of a long-sunken ship. We have traveled far through the stars and the currents. We have felt the salt spray on our faces, the rhythmic sway of the great double hulls. But the final mystery remains. The true legacy is found not in what we know, but in what they refused to write down, what they kept sacred, what they carried only in their beating hearts. The navigators slept, sometimes eyes closed, sometimes open to the deep black canvas above. But even in sleep, their bodies were instruments of knowing. The subtle shift in the water pressure on the soles of their feet, the faint metallic scent of a landmass still leagues away. The sound, the deep ocean sound, bouncing back from invisible coral heads far beneath the surface. We try to chart this now. We try to map the genius onto paper, onto screens. It resists us. It slips away like wet sand through open fingers, because the true technique was not a series of instructions. It was a state of being, a deep, eternal resonance with the moving water, with the breathing earth, a resonance we have forgotten in our modern blinding light. Think now of the weight of their wisdom, the 1,000 generations, watching them, watching their small vessels against the terrible void. They risked everything for the knowledge they held. And when they finally arrived on the new volcanic shores, did they immediately start charting the return? Or did they immediately forget the way back? Did they erase the mental map the moment they decided this new land, this new fire was home? This is the great haunting of the Pacific, the ghostly fleet, the canoes that sailed one last time into the mythical deep, leaving no trace, no written log, no permanent marker of the perfect route. They became myth while they were still alive. They became the very air. They breathed the water they mastered. The legacy is not the islands they found. The legacy is the deep, beautiful, devastating silence they left behind. The silence that demands we listen closer to the wind, to the wave, to the shell, pressed against the ear. We are chasing shadows, chasing the lingering scent of burning sandalwood and damp rope. We are chasing a secret sealed not by wax, but by the absolute commitment to oral tradition. If the story was lost, everything was lost. And perhaps that is exactly what happened. A great forgetting, a necessary severing, to ensure the descendants remained fixed, remained rooted in the new soil. The old stars faded, the new mountains became the guiding force. The blood remembers, though the mind might stray. The DNA of every islander still carries the rhythm of the open sea, the instinct to lean into the turn of the current. It is a silent code, a sleeping magic waiting for the right moment to awaken. We close this journey across the silent water with more questions than we began. The canoes are resting, now pulled high onto the warm white sand. The great voyage is complete, but the colonization, the settlement, the true terror of the first moments has only just begun. Wait for the next turning of the tide. Next time, we stop looking at the horizon and start looking down at the ground. We leave the open water, the comfortable, familiar vastness. We land hard on the sharp hue and forgiving edge of a new Eden, and we ask a far darker question. What did they find waiting for them in the dense jungle quiet? What happened when the ocean gods stopped watching? What strange, forgotten rivalries did they bring with them? What strange darkness did they awaken on the shore? What happened after the perfect landfall? What was the true cost of belonging? I remember the fire. I remember the fire. The sharp scent of the burning pine. The low, deep sound of the coconut shells turning gray. Crackling in the hot air. The amber glow, pulling the shadows back, keeping the vast dark night at bay. We gathered close in that light, safe on the warm, dry earth of the Matu. This memory, this ancient memory of warmth, it is the first anchor of the soul, the secure rhythm of the village, breathing in the dust. But what happens when the fire is taken? When the fire is taken, and only the water remains. When the fire is gone, and the dark is absolute. We know they voyaged. We know they traveled weeks at sea. But how did they sleep? How did they truly rest? When the great comfort of the hearth was suddenly, utterly erased. That is the forgotten secret of the ancient Pacific mariner. The secret the ocean whispered to the sleeping mind. The secret of finding absolute stillness in motion. The transition was not a loss, but a translation. The rhythmic crackle of the fire pit. It became the rhythmic slap of the hull. The constant wet sound of the water against the koa wood. SHHH went the ocean. SHHH went the deep blue. A different kind of heat, a different kind of safety. The canoe itself became the hearth, a floating womb of engineered comfort. 60 feet long, 60 feet long, gliding through the black. The mast, it sighed, the rigging, it hummed. The low, slow, steady vibration of life, persisting upon the surface of the infinite. The wave motion was the ultimate lullaby, not the sharp jolt of modern travel, but the deep sway, the deep comforting sway. A slow arc, a return, a slow arc, and a return. The body surrendered completely, back to the deep biological memory of fluid movement, of floating before birth. The Polynesian mind, the masterful Polynesian mind. It found its new anchor, not in the fixed point of land, but in the fixed rhythm of the wave. They spoke of the Hokupa, the steady star, the star that never moves. But the deeper steadiness was the boat itself. The vessel was built to sing a specific slow song. The water was thick and cold and vast below, but above it, the deck, the precious planking. It offered a surface of absolute, unwavering trust. Think of the sound. Think of the hypnotic sound. The constant slosh, slosh, slosh of the bilgewater. A soft internal pulse reminding them, you are contained, you are contained, you are still safe. In the belly of this great creature, this deep awareness, this somatic awareness, it allowed the shift from active navigation to passive deep history sleep. They were sleeping their way across the maps, resting their way across the maps. The shift worker, the weary sailor, the man who had pulled the rope all day. He lay down on the deck. He felt the cool smoothness of the wood beneath his shoulder blades, and the dark took him not with terror, but with the certainty of the movement continuing. The world was rocking him. The world was rocking him softly, slowly, slowly, into the quiet dark. The air above was cold, yes, the spray was sharp, yes, but the movement was the blanket, thick and constant, thick and constant. The heart rate slowed, the breath dropped deep into the belly. There was no sudden noise of a slamming door, no sharp crack of a breaking branch, just the endless deep murmur of the sea. The sea whispers to those who listen without fear, telling them of the currents, the slow turning of the earth. It is the oldest lullaby, the most powerful sedative. The fire is gone, yes, the fire is gone. But the deep, deep water, it took its place and offered a sleep far more profound, a sleep woven into the very fabric of the Pacific night. The wood sighs a breath, leaving the fire pit. Listen closely to that sound, the hiss of sap yielding to the orange heat. We speak often of the romance. The brave star maps the courage, but tonight we linger here, in the quiet space of the deep, long cold, the cold that clings to memory, the cold that settled on the great canoes. We feel the warmth now on our skin, an amber shield against the night. But out there on the water, there was no shield, only the relentless gray, the moral gray of survival. The wave does not care for your intentions. The deep ocean asks for a toll, and that toll was paid not just in hours, but in the slow, steady erosion of the self. Listen to the crackle, the small snap of a forgotten branch. Imagine that snap was the sound of hope breaking, just for an instant, in the middle of a 19-day passage. The navigators, they were heroes, yes, but they were also calculators of misery. They had to know who was fatting fastest. They had to choose who received the final drops of fresh water. They had to look into the eyes of exhaustion and demand another hour of paddling, another shift of vigilance. This is the hidden cost of the great sleep voyage. They sailed into the quiet deep, seeking new life, but carrying death on the edges of their minds. The smells of that journey were not the clean scent of ocean spray. No, the smells were the truth of human endurance. The heavy, dense, metallic scent of salt mixed with fear. The sour rot of wet, woven fiber that never ever dried. The stale, sweet smell of fermented coconut oil used to treat the chafe. The smell of bodies packed too close, breathing the same damp air. For weeks and weeks of perpetual darkness, the cold was not a sharp cold like mountain snow. It was a penetrating, slow cold, a cold that lived in the muscles, a cold that settled beneath the sternum. It seeped up from the hull planks, soaked through the thin loincloths. It was the cold of being permanently saturated, the constant rocking, the hypnotic slow sway meant to soothe the journey, became an enemy. It stole the solid earth beneath their minds. It blurred the boundary between waking and dream. They slept in snatches. Their sleep was not restorative rest. It was a kind of suspended vigilance, a necessary collapse. They dreamed of the sound of land, not the roar of surf, but the simple, quiet rustle of a palm frond, a sound that meant solidity, a sound that meant dryness, a sound that meant the moral calculations could cease. The captain, the Tonga, the master navigator, he carried the heaviest weight of all, the knowledge that if he made a single error, a single misreading of the wave contour, the price paid by his crew, the price paid by their children, would be lost in the vastness. He had to be the rock that did not rock. He had to be the eye that did not close. He had to demand suffering to ensure survival. That weight, that deep, silent burden, that is the gray that shadows the glory. It is the necessary cruelty of the sea. Feel the heat on your face now. The fire keeps talking to us, telling us their story. We listen to the whispers of the ember, and we remember the cold. We remember the immense distance and the human heart that bore it, a heart beating in the middle of nowhere, demanding dawn, demanding land, demanding light. The deep blue memory lingers, a blue too old to name. The wake has settled now. The great Vaca rests upon the sand, its hull scarred by the teeth of 100 storms, its mast silent to the trade wind's call. We spoke of the journey, the crossing, the raw physics of faith and fiber, but the true history, the sustaining history, is not found in the landfall. It is found in the lingering silence. The wood is ancient now. The scent of the burning pine has long faded, replaced by the cold musk of coral dust. Yet the knowledge still lives in the spiral shell of the oceanic mind. The legacy is not the arrival. It is the echo of the departure. 1,000 journeys compressed into one memory. The navigators stepped ashore, and the great star map they carried in their heads began its slow disintegration. This is the great tragedy of the Pacific, not the destruction by outsiders, but the terrible slow forgetting from within. We know the final coordinates, the names etched onto modern maps, but the voyage whispers secrets kept by the currents themselves. The true chart the map of the living sea. Where is it hidden? Where does it sleep? It sleeps perhaps in the bloodline, in the muscle memory of the paddle stroke, in the children who still look up at the zenith and see not random fire, but the guiding fish hook of Maui. Consider the sheer enormity of their achievement. They did not just find islands. They created an entire ocean system, a network of thought woven across a void. They did not conquer the ocean. They married it. They learned its temperament, its breathing pattern. They learned the precise crackling sound of a shallow reef hidden 10 miles away, the hypnotic whisper of the deep trench. But what did they leave unwritten? The deepest mystery is not how they did it, but what they chose to erase. What terrifying knowledge was deemed too dangerous to pass through the generations. There are stories whispered in the atolls, stories of the ghost islands, places charted not by the stars of the sky, but by the shadows of the water, islands that appear only when the tide is perfect, islands that vanish when a human heart is filled with doubt. The mystery of the unrecorded settlements, the great silence that follows a success too large to comprehend. They arrived, they planted life, they departed, leaving nothing but the warmth of the newly tilled soil and the lingering scent of burning sandalwood. This is the essence of history as a dream, a beautiful memory that is slowly dissolving, like sea foam in the harsh midday sun. We chase the ghosts of Rada and Tupia, yet the great ocean silence swallows their celestial lexicon, a quiet decay, a slow forgetting. The house of stars, the massive navigational library, built entirely of breath and trust. It is closing its final door. We believe we understand survival. We chart the fishing grounds. We analyze the currents. But they had a secret tool, a deep science of the living water itself, something more profound than a compass or a calculation. They knew how to survive the unsurvivable. They knew how to drink the ocean, how to tame the very salt that should have killed them. Next time, we will dive into the most profound and unsettling knowledge of the ancient voyagers, the knowledge of the deep, deep thirst. How did they last months without rain? How did they pull pure fresh water from the infinite blue brine? What forgotten ritual did they perform to turn poison into life, to defy the greatest killer of the sea? We will examine the lost science of the water gatherers and the dangerous secret hidden within the salt, a secret that is still practiced today in the quietest corners of the great ocean. Prepare your senses. The flavor of survival is sharp and terrible, and we must taste the salt ourselves. We remember the fire first, the slow hiss of the damp, wood taking the heat, a low amber breath in the deep night, the shadow dance on the rough-hewn stone, pine smoke rising slow. It smelled like earth and memory and salt, a comforting thing, a circle of light against the deep darkness. We talk of stars and currents. We chart the maps of the empty water. We celebrate the courage of the ancient voyager. But the true secret of the long canoe, the forgotten wisdom of the deep Polynesian sleep, was not navigation at all. It was the mastering of silence, a deeper kind of silence than the world allows. Can you remember a time when the shore completely disappeared, when only the water spoke, and sleep was simply the ocean taking you home? The land noise fades, the drum stops its anxious beat. The arguments of the crowded shore become soft echoes. Now only the water, the steady push of the double-hulled waka, a continuous slow drone deep in its belly. They called it the ocean cradle, a vessel designed for the deep surrender, the true slow journey into the dark forgetfulness. Imagine that first night far out, where the horizon is only water, no island shadow, no rising plume of smoke, only the endless velvet swell. The fire memory slowly cools in your mind, and a new warmth takes its place. The warmth of the shared hull, the shared breath, the rhythm of the sleeping crew, side by side breathing together, slow, deep slow. The smell of wet coconut fiber, the smooth dark wood under the palm of your hand, the cold spray hitting the face, then drying warm on the skin. The constant lull, the constant rocking. 1,000 movements, repeated 1,000 times. The body learned to match the motion of the water. The heart learned to beat at the gentle speed of the slow rolling wave. They did not measure days the way we measure minutes. They measured the quality of the sleep, the depth of the surrender. The weeks at sea were not marked by sunrises. They were marked by the time it took for the mind to truly unclench, to release the worry of the shore, the hunger of the village. The worry. It melted into the salt spray, and the deep, dark sleep came. This was not a hostile environment for rest. It was an engineered environment for rest, a place where external chaos could not intrude. The soft rush of the water passing the hull, the slight creak of the lashings singing a wood song, the perfect frequency for the deepest theta waves. an oceanic hypnosis, a journey not just across the surface of the world, but into the hidden depths of the mind. The elders understood that to voyage for a month, you must learn to sleep for a month. To master the emptiness of the blue, you must master the emptiness of your own thoughts. The Polynesian navigator was not merely a pilot of the sea. He was a caretaker of collective rest. He maintained the rhythm. He maintained the slow, smooth glide. He ensured the vessel was a silent machine for sleep. Look at the surface now in your mind, the gentle reflection of the star, field on the black ocean mirror. No street lights, no city noise, no frantic calls. Only the whisper of the sail, a quiet, soft shiver, and the deep, slow breathing of the world around you. The true Polynesian secret was that the ocean itself was the greatest lullaby, a history whispered across the centuries. Sleep on the dark, slow breathing water. Sleep deep, slow sleep. We stay by the fire tonight. We breathe the wood smoke deep, deep down. The cedar whispers its soft story, a comfort, a blanket against the brutal truth. We talked of the stars, of the magnificent knowledge, the geometric perfection of the ocean voyage. But the fire knows the secret, the heavy secret, the cost of that perfection, the deep human price. Look into the heart of the ember now. It is not red, it is a deep bitter orange. It reflects the skin of the sleeping navigator, stretched tight by hunger and endless weeks of brine. Imagine the cold, not the sharp mountain cold that breaks you quickly, but the insidious maritime cold, the cold that is always wet, always clinging. It settles into the joints. It never leaves. It is in the clothing, the fiber, the hair, the skin. The navigator woke soaked, slept soaked, lived soaked. Wet, 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 for 50 days straight. The dampness bred sickness, a soft, cruel cough. The sound carried across the low deck in the darkness. A terrible sound, the sound of inevitable loss. Listen closely to the crackle. It masks the sound of the ocean wind whipping past the mast. But underneath that wind was the sound of shivers, the sound of the weak moaning, low, 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 and the smell, the terrible, overwhelming smell, not just the clean salt spray that poetry describes, but the rank smell of bodies pressed together, unwashed, unmoving, for weeks of heavy passage, the scent of stale sweat mixed with vomit, the decay of stored provisions gone soft and bitter, the smell of fear, the smell of failure, a thick, heavy layer coating everything on the vessel. The navigators, they were heroes, yes, but they were also performing the dark arithmetic. They watched the sick man cough his life away. They watched the child grow too quiet, too still. And the question was never if someone would die. The question was who and when and how many more. This is the moral gray that the stars do not show. The moment the Tonga, the master navigator, must look at the dying and calculate the rations. To save two, he must doom one. To make landfall, he must accept the necessary cruelty. It is not malice, it is survival. It is the weight of the entire future island on his shoulders. He knows the families back home are depending on his choice. He knows the canoes are fragile. The sea is indifferent. He holds the knowledge that sets him above men. But that knowledge is purchased with human suffering. It is a lonely, terrible bargain. The most beautiful voyage is also the most brutal. The sun rises and warms the deck briefly, but the cold remains inside the bone, inside the memory. They rationed the food, the precious coconut water. They watched their strength drain day by day. The hunger was a constant companion, a gnawing hum. The hunger, the endless hunger, the soul-sucking hunger. They dreamed of the sweetness of fresh water. They dreamed of the sound of dry land underfoot. But they woke to the endless blue repeating itself. Horizon, horizon, empty, empty. We breathe the warmth of the fire now. We feel the safety of this dry earth. Remember the people who paid that price, who made the choice to push on when all hope was brine. They had to turn away from the sick faces. They had to be cold, to remain focused, remain alive. They made the brutal sacrifice so their people could sleep, so new generations could know the comfort of soil. We honor that age, hard arithmetic. We honor the cold decision in the deep, dark night. The fire settles into soft, quiet breathing now. The amber falls, the amber falls, the gentle amber falls. The great ocean breathing slows now. The ancient canoes have come to rest, resting on the coral bed, resting near the high volcanic cliffs. The journey ends, but the legacy remains. It is not written in ink or parchment. The legacy is the stone itself, the immense weight of the Mary, the sacred platforms built upon the land, built to hold the memory. The memory whispers in the basalt. It whispers the names of the first navigators, the ones who saw the sun dip and rise 100 times, 100 times without seeing land. Only the deep blue, the endless deep blue. They did not need maps of paper. They did not need maps of ink. They carried the map within the bloodline. The chart was etched into the bone of the grandfather, passed to the son through the slow rhythm of the paddle. A secret map, a living chart. The direction lay not just in the stars above, but in the feeling of the water beneath, the feeling of the current against the hull, the currents they named and understood, the currents they loved. We ask how they found these pinpoint islands, these specks of green dust in the enormous void. But perhaps the deeper mystery is why they stopped. Why did the great migrations cease? The sail was furled for centuries, the double-hulled vessel put to sleep, a long, long sleep. Did they find the perfect island, the final harbor where no more seeking was needed? Did the knowledge become too heavy to carry? Did the salt truth of the roots become sacred? So sacred it could only be whispered only to the oldest priest, and then allowed to fade, allowed to dissolve. The scholars search for the lost logs. The historians seek the missing coordinates. They look for scrolls and journals, but the ocean people wrote their history in the living ocean. The waves were their parchment, the birds their only script. They left no permanent record except the silence, great silence that settles over the lagoon after the labor of travel is done. The silence is their final testament. The wind shifts slightly now, carrying the scent of plumeria and ancient damp earth. The warmth of the fire crackles softly, a slow low crackle, a comfortable sound. We lie down in the comfort of their vast journey. We lie down knowing they settled the greatest space on earth, settled it with courage and pure intellect that saw the invisible island, the island predicted by the slow flight of a lone frigate bird, the island felt through the refracted wave patterns. The great oceanic lullaby sings us to sleep, a deep, deep sleep. The ocean breathes us in and breathes us out. The legacy is safe in the depths. The knowledge sleeps within the reef shad. But the deep quiet of the Pacific heart, this ancestral sleep, it would not last forever. The salt-rimmed horizon was still vast, but soon it would hold something new, something impossible, a mountain that floated, a floating mountain that carried fire. It was a shadow that grew larger and stranger, a sail unlike any they had ever woven from pandanus leaf, a giant wing that spoke of greed and distant kingdoms, a wing that brought metal and fear. The slumber of the ancestors was about to be broken by a terrifying new arrival. What happens when the people of the stars, the ones who map the cosmos by instinct, what happens when they meet the men who carry compasses and believe the world is their possession? What happens when the great sleep is interrupted by the sound of a cannon? Remember the fire, the slow burn of the pine knots, a heavy comforting heat against the cold night. Listen to the crackle, the wood sighing as it gave way, a sound like soft thunder far away. The amber glow painting the darkness, a slow lick of flame whispering secrets, the scent of burning, pitch sharp and sweet. We sat so close, watching the embers lift and fade, carrying forgotten secrets upwards. We remember the great journeys. We remember the stars and the currents. We remember the double-hulled canoes slicing the dark water. But the deepest secret, the most profound riddle of the wide Pacific is this: how do you find true sleep when there is no land, only endless movement? How do you teach your body stillness when your world is perpetually rocking? How do you rest your soul on the water itself? We speak of navigation, of wayfinding without instruments, but the true mastery was in the surrender, the absolute willingness to be carried for weeks at a time, weeks when the rhythm of the waves became the only metronome, the only clock, the only heartbeat. Imagine the deep water. Imagine the hull beneath you, a thin skin between breath and endless dark. The great voyagers had to train, not just their eyes for the swell, not just their hands for the tiller, but their inner ear for peace. The rocking, the perpetual rocking, it can drive madness, or it can sing a lullaby. It depends entirely on the degree of trust. The canoe was a cradle, but a cradle that demanded utter faith. When you lie down, you must believe that the structure will hold, You must trust the lashings. You must trust the hands of the waking watch. You must trust the very physics of the open sea. The sound of the ocean at night is not uniform. It is not one vast white noise. It is a complexity, a constant shift of shushing and sighing, the water hitting the hull, the slight groaning of the wooden spars, the steady drip, drip, drip of residual spray. These sounds, they become the blanket. They become the shelter. To sleep on land, you rely on stillness. You search for firm ground, for solid resistance. To sleep on the sea, you must embrace the motion. You must accept the instability as the only stable fact. This is the discipline, the slow undoing of earthly expectation. The sailor's sleep was a cultivated state, a quiet pact made with the deep. They did not sleep in long, unbroken stretches. Not often. They learned the art of the half-sleep, the watch-keeping rest, a state where the body rests deeply, the brain slows, but the peripheral senses remain alert, listening for the change in the wind pitch, feeling for the sudden snap of the current. It is a form of meditation, an involuntary ASMR born of necessity. The hypnotic shushing, the rhythmic sway, rocking you deeper, rocking you further away from shore, closer to the secret center of the journey, when you are surrounded by water, when the horizon is your bedroom wall, and the stars your ceiling. You learn to compress rest, to maximize the depth of every small cycle. The deep water carries you. The deep water feeds your dreams. The deep water demands your stillness. And in that demanding stillness, they found the most profound rest, a sleep built entirely on ocean trust. The embers settle now, a deep, deep orin, a low, gentle hiss. We are warm here. We are safe from the dark waters, but the salt is in the air still. It clings to the wood. It clings to the memory. The fire tries to cover it. The sweet scent of burning pine. It tries to cover the sour memory. The smell of the voyage. What does weeks at sea truly smell like? Not just the bright salt spray. That is the tourist scent. It smells of wet exhaustion, the dense sour tang of sweat and unwashed wool, the rot of spoiled breadfruit deep in the hold, the heavy metallic scent of fear, fear that settled like the morning dew and never truly lifted. The navigator sits at the stern. He smells the weather on the wind, but he also smells the despair on his crew. And that is the heaviest scent of all. He knows the moral gray of the journey. It is not about heroics under the bright sun. It is about decisions made in the deep, cold dark. The decision of who gets the last ladle of water. The decision of whose sickness is too slow to warrant the dwindling resource. The ocean demanded sacrifice, not just of time and distance, but of the small, quiet certainties of being human. They traded kindness for survival. They traded easy sleep for necessary vigilance. We sit now by the fire and hear only the crackle, the soft, low hush. But out there on the water, the sound was relentless. It was not the poetry of the sea. It was the constant thwack, the hull meeting the endless wave, the groan of the heavy timbers, the ceaseless slap of the spray across the deck, the sound of the rigging, whining a high-pitched complaint, a constant, demanding whisper. Go faster, go faster. The wind was a tireless judge, and the worst sound of all, the heavy silence of the crew, when the exhaustion was so deep that even the children stopped their whimpering. A terrifying quiet descended, the quiet that meant the spirit was close to breaking. The cold came with that quiet, not just the chill that bites the skin, but the cold that sinks into the bone, the damp that never leaves the cloth, never leaves the palm, the cold indifference of the Pacific vastness. It wraps around the canoe. It tells the navigator he is nothing, a speck of life in an eternity of water. And how do you fight that cold? How do I? Oh, fight the cold of knowing that you are carrying the fragile lives of your entire lineage. The warmth of the fire here is a miracle, a blessed sanctuary. It reminds us of the hearths they left behind, and the hearths they prayed to find. The fire dances, a slow, hypnotic rhythm. It is the rhythm of the memory of sacrifice. They did not sleep easy, those navigators. They closed their eyes only for necessary rest, a shallow, fractured rest. Their minds were always charting, calculating the drift, the current, the star path. Their sleep was a duty, not a luxury. They gave up the right to deep, quiet slumber so that we could have this island, so that we could have this warmth, the moral gray of the ocean journey. It stains the perfect story of sun and sail. It is the cost of arrival, the heavy, silent cost. We remember the scent of fear. We remember the sound of the tired wind. We remember the deep, deep cold. And we know the moral debt remains, a debt paid in exhaustion and lonely choices, a history whispered low by the embers, a history that sleeps now only because they sailed on. They sailed and they sailed on. Through the vast cold night, the ocean breathes a long, slow breath. The great canoes are pulled ashore now, their great sails furled tight, resting under the high palms of history. We watch the fading light of those first journeys, the dust of ages settling on the deepest, most silent lagoons. This is the legacy. They did not write their maps on parchment. They did not carve their secrets into stone towers. Their maps, their true maps, were written on the water, on the rise and fall of the sea swell, on the deep blue memory of the ocean itself. They read the currents as we read a book. They felt the reflection of distant land in the bending of the waves, a gentle truth, a whispered geometry, 100,000 miles of water, now silent, now still, but the knowledge remains, a pulse beneath the tide, a powerful truth that settles deep within the dark. We speak of the mastery. We speak of the sheer, staggering scale of their ambition, but there is a silence too, a profound quiet that historians ponder, a great mystery of movement. Why did they slow? Why did the glorious outward push, the rapid expansion across the endless blue, why did that powerful current begin to settle, to pause after millennia of finding every speck of green, every hidden mountain peak? A great stillness fell, a silence that hangs heavy over the deep Pacific. Perhaps the knowledge was too precious. Perhaps the risk became too great. Perhaps the gods of the wind demanded too high a price for passage. We listen for the ghostly sound of the paddle now. We hear only the gentle wash of the shore. The ancestors are there still, standing at the edge of the world, watching the horizon. Watching the horizon, they left behind names, whispered from generation to generation, names that mean nothing to us now, but carried the coordinates of the entire world, the hidden latitude, the forgotten longitude. They knew that fire could not burn memory. They knew that time could not erase the stars. They built a civilization on the water itself, a waterborne empire that required nothing but courage and careful observation. The stars above them were their great clock, their gentle guiding light. We close the logbook of this long voyage. We let the deep sea sleep for a moment, and we honor the map makers of the deep, who saw the world not as separate islands, but as a single shimmering web, a unified silk dark ocean. But even in this slumbering greatness, even in this peaceful history, a powerful secret remains, a truth buried not in the ocean floor, but carried deep within the hull of the largest canoes. We have explored the sailing, we have admired the navigation, but we have not yet opened the forgotten cargo hold. There was something else carried across that black water, something heavier than the water itself, a hidden payload of fear, a dangerous knowledge that shaped every island they ever found, a secret that required the building of the most mysterious monuments on Earth. Next time, we sail to the silence of the stone giants. We confront the legend of the first fire and the terrible price of taking the ocean's most precious secret. We open the hidden hold and listen to the grinding of the stone, a secret too large for the waves to carry. Remember the fire, the deep fire, the hungry fire. We sat close to the heat, the crackling wood speaking low, a whisper of dry pine singing its death song. The smoke rose slow and sweet, thick with the scent of salt and ancient history, that hot amber glow, spreading soft and slow across the sand, reaching. But what if the fire was not a tool for warmth? What if the fire was a key to unlock the mind's deep silence? What if the most crucial piece of navigation equipment was not the celestial sphere, but the state of sleep itself? This is the secret forgotten in the archives, the slow, deep truth of the long voyage. Imagine the open water now. No shore, no horizon, just the cradle of the swell. 1,000 miles of empty blue, stretching. How does one sleep when danger is everywhere? When the vastness threatens to swallow the soul? When the wooden hull is all that separates us from the crushing black depth. We do not simply sleep. We become the water. We surrender to the hypnotic rhythm. The ocean's lullaby. Weeks at sea, weeks at sea. The mind slows. The world shrinks to the sound of the hull. The gentle thrum of wood against wave. A rhythmic, gentle thrum. A pulse, a deep pulse. Listen closely. Hear the water slipping past the outrigger, whispering secrets into the dark. Slish slosh, slish slosh. The ASMR of survival. The constant repetition. The sound that guarantees tomorrow. The navigators, they understood this frequency. They did not sleep like you sleep. They practiced a deep, rest-awaking sleep, an ancient Polynesian yoga of the deep ocean. One eye closed the other, watching the mast's gentle arc. The body rested, the soul active, tuned to the infinitesimal shift in the wind's breath, tuned to the slight change in the flavor of the air. Saltier, sweeter rain approaching. They followed the stars, yes. They followed the birds, yes. But beneath that conscious reckoning was the dream compass, the deep subconscious mapping the currents, the miles, melting miles, melting miles. The subtle force of the ocean stream, felt not through sight, but through the muscle memory of the hull's vibration. The low hum, the steady hum. Imagine the canoe as a massive water bed, rocking slow, rocking, steady rocking slow. 8 men packed tight beneath the canopy. The smell of wet sennit and dried fish. The low breath of men who trust the stars, who trust the wood, who trust the ancient knowledge of the water. We enter the realm of slow history now, the history of time dilation, when a day becomes a week, when a week becomes a single, endless meditation. The silence of the middle ocean, deeper than any forest quiet. They say we travel to find land, but perhaps we travel to find the deepest silence, the place where the spirit can truly rest, where the dreams are the only map, to drift, to drift, to drift, to let the water tell your story, to let the deep current guide your tired mind, the steady flow, the constant flow. The voyage was a lesson in letting go of the shore, letting go of the fear, embracing the lull, the soft, deep lull. The ocean's true secret is that it never demands effort, only acceptance. Slow, steady, powerful acceptance. Sleep deep, rest easy. The water knows the way. The fire is long dead now, but the memory of its light, its crackle, its warmth, that is the memory of the home we sought. The deep, steady comfort of moving slowly toward the dawn. The fire whispers now, a soft, slow hiss of resin and ancient pine. The heat is a heavy velvet cloak against the night, a deep amber shield against the memory. We sit close now. We seek the warmth because we remember the cold, the deep crushing cold of the open sea. It was not the joyous dance history paints for children. It was a test, a sustained, cruel test of the human spirit. Weeks blurred into months. Weeks blurred into months. The canoe, the waka, it became a hollow shell of misery and salt. The smell you see, The smell stays with you long after the journey ends. It was the sour air of sickness, the smell of fish, guts baking under the tropical sun, the metallic tang of old blood mixed with brine, and the perpetual dampness, the unending dampness. There was no dry place to rest your head. Your clothes, perpetually glued to your skin, a constant sandpaper against open sores, saltwater sores that never healed. The weight of the cold settled in the bones. It was a cold that did not come from the air alone. It came from the knowledge of the water below, the black endless water, always waiting. The sound of the ocean was not a lullaby. It was the sound of a beast chewing on the hull, the relentless slap of the waves against the woven lashings, a groan, a constant moan from the wood itzy, LF, and the silence of the crew, the desperate conserving of energy, every breath measured, every movement weighed. And here is where the moral gray begins to seep into the wood grain. The navigator, the Araki, they carried the silent ledger of survival. They were counting stars. Yes, but they were counting water rations. They were counting breaths, and they were counting the sick. The unspoken arithmetic of survival demanded terrible choices. Who gets the last drops of the hoarded rain water? Who is strong enough to bail for the next 10 hours? Who has become a burden, a sacred weight that must be endured, or perhaps sadly left behind? The deep sleep they sought was a drug, a momentary escape from the truth of the burden, of the weight, of the command. To be the leader was to know that your wisdom might save them all, or your single error might doom every single soul. The silence of command is the deepest silence. When the storm hits and the gods seem to have forgotten your sacrifice, the chief must stand tall, but internally they are calculating the odds. They are sacrificing the weak on the altar of the future. They are watching the faces of the children and feeling the impossible pressure. The choice, the constant, unforgiving choice. They smelled the fear. They tasted the despair. They fought the urge to simply lie down and let the waves take them. But they had the sacred duty to find the land, to honor the promise to the ancestors. They paddled and bilayed and sailed by the invisible roads, driven by a hope that felt thinner than the air itself. The cold settles deeper. The memories are sharp and slick with brine. We warm our hands by this fire, a small, perfect warmth. We remember the immense cost of that journey, the sheer physical agony, the endless cold, the unending wait. We remember the choices they made and the silence with which they carried those deeds. We are safe now. The amber glow holds us safe. Safe. We listen to the soft crackle of the wood and know the ocean is sleeping far, far away. The sun sets now on the great Canoe arc. The deep blue sleep has settled over these silent islands. We have measured the distance. We have felt the spray. We have listened to the low hum of the basalt mountains, the stories of the navigators, of the star priests. They left not scrolls, they left stones. They left giant silent figures staring out across the edge of everything. These statues, they whisper the truth. The true map of the ocean is not ink on paper. It is the memory of the wave, the rhythm of the wind, the taste of the rain, the way the deep water breathes. That is the legacy, the profound and aching simplicity. But legacy always carries a shadow, a weight of mystery that the salt cannot wash away. We ask not how they traveled, but why they stopped. The great expansion, the glorious wave of discovery. It reached its furthest point, and then the spirit drew back. The fire dimmed, the canoes pulled onto the final sand, and the knowledge began its slow, gentle descent into forgetting. Why did the master celestial knowledge evaporate? Why did the ability to read the deep currents vanish from the spoken word? Was it a sickness? Was it a choice, a deliberate turning away from the endless horizon? Was it simply that they finally found what they were seeking and realized the greatest journey was the journey home, the journey inward? The mystery hangs heavy like the humid air before a storm. The forgotten gods watch us watch them. We trace their ancient slipways, the marks of their hulls in the stone coral. We hear the echo of the conch shell, but the sound is hollow. The lineage of the star priest is broken. A deliberate break, a slow, quiet forgetting, a vast historical silence that speaks louder than 1,000 voyages, a silence that stretches across 5,000 miles of perfect blue water, the silence of knowing too much perhaps. We talk of their triumphs, their speed, their courage. We do not talk enough of their retreat. The moment the great heart of exploration paused, the culture decided the edge was sufficient. The world was charted, and the charts were thrown back into the sea, leaving us with fragments, leaving us with giant heads on lonely islands, staring into the unknowable future. The islanders, they carry the blood, the deep bone memory, but the technical perfection, the wayfinding genius, it sleeps beneath the gentle lapping of the tides. It sleeps. It waits for a question brave enough to wake it. And so we leave the deep Pacific for a time. We leave the whisper of the sail, the comfort of the vast open sea. We leave the legacy of the wave, riders, the stone builders. We look now to a different darkness, a land not of water, but of dust and shad, a place where the mountains claw at the sky, and where the wind tells different stories. Stories of forgotten giants, not of the sea, but of the high, dry plateau. We have listened to the sea speak its secrets. But what if the greatest navigation was not across the water at all? What if the true hidden map rests beneath the jungle canopy, far, far from the smell of salt and spray? Next we ask, who were the desert sailors of the Andes? And why did their stones weep gold? I remember the fire, always the fire, the slow heat of the embers, the dying day, a memory of dry earth of final comfort, the sound of the drying wood, it crackled, it sighed, an amber glow against the deep, deep dark, the scent of burning pines soft and sweet in the cool air. We talk of the great voyages, the stars, the courage, the knowing. But there is a secret, the deepest secret of all. we forget how they rested. How did the body find peace when the world was liquid, when the horizon was a myth, a promise always shifting? How did the great voyagers find sleep when the lullaby was only the endless ocean swell? Listen closely, now listen to the water breathing. This is slow history. This is HISTOR, LULLUBY. We journey weeks and weeks, sometimes months at sea. The canoe is not a stable bed. It is a muscle always flexing. The body longs for stillness, for the stone, for the sand. But the stone is gone. The sand is gone. Only water remains. Water remains. Water remains. Imagine the darkness, absolute, the kind that presses against your eyes. The deep blue-black beneath a ceiling of endless stars. The only rhythm you know is the sea's slow sway. The great Polynesian canoes, they were cradles of survival. They were long, they were low, they were perfectly balanced, designed not just to move forward, but to whisper against the waves, to whisper and to hold, to rock the weary body. The rocking is hypnotic, the constant, gentle motion. The constant, gentle motion. It is the opposite of land rest. It is a surrender, a deep commitment to the movement. You must let the ocean carry your weight, your fear, your worry. The floor of the canoe becomes your hammock, your memory of home. The crew sleeps in shifts, a sacred trust, a constant watch. One eye on the sail, one ear to the hull, one hand on the steering paddle. The knowledge that someone is always awake allows the others to sink down into the profound exhaustion of the voyage. You cannot sleep deeply. For long you cannot dream away the dangers. But you can find a trance, a half-sleep, a watery meditation. The sound, the perpetual sound, the ASMR of the deep, the gentle slap of the spray against the woven hull, the creak of the lashings singing under strain, the low moan of the wind across the sailcloth, the tapa cloth. These sounds become a blanket, a heavy soothing weight. They mask the terror, they amplify the peace. The body learns a new language of rest. The navigator sleeps lightly, listening to the water's murmur. He reads the waves with his back, not his eyes. He feels the deep Pacific current shift beneath the hull. Even in sleep, he is navigating, he is guiding, he is sensing. This is the true mastery of the voyagers. Not just the finding of the small island, but the finding of stillness in the greatest storm of motion. They domesticated the discomfort. They turned the uncertainty into a constant hum of belonging. The canoe was home. The sea was their mother. She held them, she rocked them, she kept them breathing. So when you imagine the ancient mariners sailing the vast Pacific, do not just see the hero standing tall at the stern. See the weary sailor curled tight in the deep, narrow space, covered only by the darkness and the sound of the ocean breathing, resting in the deep blue cradle, resting in the endless deep blue cradle. The secret is not endurance. The secret is surrender, absolute surrender to the water's sway. And in that surrender, they found the deepest sleep, the healing sleep that brought them to the new dawn, ready once more for the star path, ready once more for the ocean's call. We stay here together by the deep amber glow. The fire breathes low, a steady, patient sound. It swallows the darkness around us. We can almost forget the cold that waits just beyond the circle of light. But they could not forget the voyagers, the starfenders, the sleepers on the wave. They carried that cold inside them. It was not a cold you could shake off with wool or fur. It was the Pacific cold, the kind that gnawed at the joints, the kind that never dried the clothes, never left the bone. A damp, relentless, heavy cold. Hear it now, the wind screams past the hut. But imagine that scream on the open deck, a noise that became the only music for weeks and weeks, a constant piercing, high note of strain, the sound of ropes taut to breaking, the low groan of the double hull, protesting every wave that slapped it hard. Slap, slap, slap. The ocean never rested, never offered silence. It was always talking, telling them how small they were, how easily they could be erased. This is the human cost. We forget when we call them heroes. We sanitize the suffering. We only see the triumph, the new island discovered. We do not look into the shadows of the canoe's wake, the moral gray of the crossing, the desperate calculation. Who gets the last piece of dried fish? Who is shivering too hard to paddle another out? Who has the fever, the salt sickness? The navigator, the master of the currents. He had to be cold, not just in body, but in spirit. He had to possess a necessary ruthlessness. The compassion he held for his people had to be balanced by the discipline that kept them alive. He knew every single human cost by name. He saw the weakness, the rising madness from thirst. He had to choose to look away sometimes, to deny the soft request for more water, because the survival of the whole 50 souls demanded that one soul suffer a little longer. He carried that secret choice, that weight of partial sacrifice across the entire ocean, a heavy, heavy burden, heavier than the great mast. Smell the journey now, not the sweet cedar of our fire, but the stink of stale bilge water, the raw sharp scent of sweat and fear, mixed with rancid coconut oil and sunkered skin, the taste of permanent salt on cracked lips, a thirst that was not just dryness, but a deep ache in the stomach, a hollow burning. They went weeks without finding rain, watching the horizon, watching the sky, watching the other tired faces, the silence of true exhaustion. That is the darkest sound of the voyage, the sound when men are too tired even to pray, when they simply wait, simply endure. They drifted sometimes in the sleep of the dying, but they endured, they woke, they kept rowing. They were bound by the cold contract of survival. Their success was built on this grim endurance, this quiet sacrifice, this willingness to push past the breaking point. The fire is warm, we are safe. We breathe in the scent of cedar and ash. But remember the cold, the choice, the weight, the navigator's solitude under the indifferent eye of the stars. He brought them home through darkness, but the darkness never truly left him. We sit now, not by a roaring fire, by the heartwood embers. Low and red, a deep quiet descends, the sound of history settling, like fine ash, the silvering ash, the final warmth we feel. The journey is done, but the ocean remembers. Remember the wayfinders. Remember the quiet strength. Remember the weeks of sleep, rocked by the cradle of the sea. Their legacy is not stone. Their legacy is water, the deep oceanic memory, carried not in books, but in bone and breath, in the rhythm of the waves. We ask now, where did the knowledge go? Why did the starlings grow dim? The vast map held in the mind, a map of currents and clouds, a map that defied charts. How did they hold it all? They held it in their dreaming. They held it in their stillness. They navigated in a state of grace, a deep, slow breathing, a connection to the living current that we have lost in our speed. The enduring mystery, the greatest secret of the vast Pacific, was that the destination was already within them. They sailed not to find land, but to confirm what their spirit already knew. They listened to the deep murmur, the language of the deep, the sound of the sea floor shifting, the quiet hum of the planet turning. They listened with their skin. They listened in their sleep. The dreams of the sailor, the dreams of the canoe, a single vessel of bone and wood and profound wisdom. That wisdom lingers still, a scent of old salt and distant sandalwood. The fire has burned down now. The dense pine has given its last heat. The amber glow softens and retreats. It pulls back into the heartwood, into the source of the flame. We see only the coals now, darkening rapidly, a faint curl of white smoke, the last breath of the history we shared, the last scent of the journey we took together. The mysteries remain. They must remain to draw us back to the silence. The history is over. The fire is dying. The long lullaby must end. But the voyaging never truly stops. Your own journey continues. The deep knowledge waits for you. In the quietest hours, let the silence wash over you now. Let the darkness embrace you. This is NASRULLAH. For HISTOR lullaby. Remember this feeling, the feeling of deep history and deeper rest. Listen to the water. Listen to the silence. Let the journey lull you. Sleep now. Sleep. Sleep deep.